I'm a Protestant minister who's just prayed a Hail Mary. That's awkward.
Hi and welcome to the show. My name is James and I'm your host. And tonight I'm going to be spending some time talking to a good friend of mine, Frank Ritchie. How about we start with taking us back? Let's go to who you were before Catholicism was even on the horizon in any way. What did faith look like for you? Because you were a Wesleyan minister, correct?
I was. Yeah, I was a Wesleyan Methodist minister. We joined the Wesleyan Methodist Church in 2004. I had a faith background going well before that. I was 5 years old when my mum got introduced to faith. But it was in the Wesleyan Methodist Church that I felt like I really come home. And I loved Wesleyan Methodist history. I loved the seriousness of the gospel in the Wesleyan Methodist Church. I love the way, if you check through Methodist history and John Wesley in the UK in particular, how the lived gospel changed society through the creation of charities and a whole lot of really good work being done. And I had grown up saying I would never be a minister. And no child grows up saying that I'm never going to be a minister unless there's something that they're feeling like they need to push against. There's something pressing going on internally. And entering the Wesleyan Methodist Church, I didn't feel like I could say no to that anymore. So that started me down a path of heading towards ministry. And I was ordained in 2012, planted a church in Hamilton in 2015. It was a denomination that I was well ensconced in and loved and still love. I still love that denomination deeply.
Yeah.
So the move into the Catholic Church wasn't because of any sense of disenfranchisement or feeling discontented with where I was. It was definitely a sense of stepping into something that I just felt was true and that I had to step into. My faith life and my ministry involves chaplaincy to people who work in news media. I do radio broadcasting thanks to the work of the CBA. So I'm on News Talk ZB once a week. I'm on Life FM and Rema once a week as well to be interviewed. So my faith life for quite some time has been representing the faith in the public square in some way.
So for some people, I think, with their faith journey or even their faith, it can feel like it's over there. There's my faith, and then this is the rest of my life.
Yeah.
But for you, that's obviously very intertwined with even your professional context as well.
Oh yeah, I think about this stuff 24/7. It is my world. It puts food on the table, and that brings its own tensions. When you're a professional Christian, there are tensions that come with that. And having to think that through was a big part of my questions about coming over into the Catholic Church as well. And the Bishop Richard in the Waikato was very good at settling me around that and saying, just affirming that I could continue doing most of the things that I do.
So if we had met 5 years ago and I had said, you know what, Frank, I reckon you're going to become Catholic one day, what would you have said to me? I mean, I'm sure very politely, but what else would you have said if someone had said that to you 5 years ago?
Yeah, we probably, to get the reaction which I'm guessing the question is looking for, we'd probably need to go back further. Because
Let's go.
5 years ago, I probably would have said, that's not really surprising. 5 years ago, I'd probably started joking to my wife that I would convert when I retire. Which I know Bishop Richard is really happy that I didn't wait till I retire, but I probably would have been a lot more open to the idea because I almost converted in 2015. It was quite an emotional thing around the question of authority, but it wasn't a fully orbed, well thought through. There wasn't an experience driving it, and so my good friend and pastor at the time, who was a very good lawyer, was able to poke enough doubt into the question for me to stay in the Wesleyan Church.
So, I mean, you talk about some of those misgivings or the misconceptions, and what are some of the ones that you think people carry about the Catholic faith in particular? Whether they're people who are coming from other denominations of Christianity or other religions, or actually coming from no faith at all?
It's a really good question, because I recognize that my journey in is quite different from someone who might be exploring faith for the first time. So for me, questions of authority, and specifically the authority of the Bishop of Rome, was central. That was the big one that needed to topple. Who do I think Mary really is? The communion of the saints. What do I think about transubstantiation? But that's someone who's already got a solid faith,
Right.
who's coming over and essentially asking some periphery questions that are important to me. Whereas someone who is exploring faith for the first time, they're going to be asking the more central questions. The Pope is important, but he's not actually the center of Catholicism. Jesus is the center of Catholicism.
Absolutely.
So anybody exploring faith for the first time is probably going to be asking questions about Jesus. Who is Jesus? What is the Bible? What do we think about the idea of God? What is prayer? All those basic things that for me were already well grounded, but I could imagine there are a lot of people exploring that who are looking at things like the Catholic Inquiry Centre.
And so I think that point around the misconceptions, like you kind of went through a few of them, and for myself, like I mean, I'm what we call a cradle Catholic, right? I was born and raised a Catholic. I'm still a Catholic now, but as I've journeyed in my own faith, and as I've had lots of friends and family who are of all sorts of different flavors, shall we say, it is kind of like what you're describing there. I was thinking it's a different journey if you've had ice cream before.
Yes.
If you've had ice cream and you're used to one flavor and now you're exploring a different flavor, that's very different to someone who's never had ice cream.
Yeah,
and so I
very
think the
much so.
questions that might come along is, well, I don't know, is ice cream good? Is it worth what everyone says ice cream is?
Yeah.
So I think maybe not the deepest metaphor in the world, but I wonder for you, when you were thinking about some of those misconceptions, particularly about Mary or about the saints, were there particular ones that really resonated to you, which you wanted to tackle first when you first started asking questions about being a Catholic?
Mary. And I know, having shared my experience of Mary with a number of people now, it's where it starts for a lot of people. Because it's one thing to be curious about Catholicism and what it thinks, and to be able to read the Catechism and go, okay, that's what Catholics think. I understand that. I can see how they get there. And sure, if I felt the need to jump the fence, I could probably go down that track on that thinking as well. But for something to embed itself in the heart, often there's something else that has to happen. And Mary is a big hurdle. You know, you head into countries around the world where they have little grottos set up and there are statues of Mary, and you might see someone bowing to that statue. Traditionally, I would have thought that was idolatry in some way. So really having to grapple with the place of Mary. And the shift there for me happened through an experience.
So let's talk about that, because you've spoken to me before about sort of the restlessness, and I was keen to understand, when did that restlessness begin? Was there a moment? Was there a person, a book, a movie? Was there something that kind of helped unsettle things, that made you sort of start to search and look?
Yeah, I would say there's probably nothing that sparked an unsettledness.
Okay.
I would say I've probably always had an element of unsettledness in my faith. My wife would say that my constant purchasing of new Bibles is probably evidence of the unsettledness. Like, no, I just really like new Bibles. But I've always searched. I've always wanted to know more and to lean into the truth. But in 2012, the year that I got ordained, I did 2 trips to the Holy Land.
Right.
And
In the same year?
In the same year.
2 trips?
2 trips.
Okay.
The first one really unsettled me. I was there with an organisation called Tear Fund, an aid and development organisation, and we were supporting some Palestinian Christian organisations and another organisation run by both Palestinians and Israelis. I went in there pretty well studied on the conflict, the geopolitics of the region, thinking, if I was to say it honestly, the only reason this hasn't been solved is probably because they haven't heard me. And I wouldn't have said that rationally at the time, but looking back, I thought, 2-state solution, here's the way forward. But when I got on the ground and I spent time with Palestinians and I spent time with Israelis and I talked to soldiers at checkpoints in the West Bank and I talked to people within Israel who were within reach of rockets that would come out of Gaza, I just got the complete sense that there's no solution. It just looked hopeless. And Christianity is a faith of hope. So if you lose hope, then what have you got? So I remember sitting in the Church of the Nativity in Bethlehem, one of the oldest churches in the world, on the site where tradition holds Jesus was born. And the Orthodox monks were doing their prayers. Incense, chanting. It's got the classic window with the beam of light that shines down on the altar with the incense wafting through it. Tourists coming in, walking down the steps under the altar to the spot where Jesus is supposed to have been born. They kiss the spot. Like, it's wonderfully holy. I thought, well, if I'm going to pray about this, this is the place to pray. And I had absolutely nothing. I lost the expectation. I lost any expectation that I had to or could do anything, that God had to do anything. and I just sat there in silence. And that profoundly shifted something. It shifted me into a contemplative space. And then when you go exploring the contemplative, the best well for that is the Catholic Church. It's the mystics. And so I started down that track. And coming out of that first trip, I was having some panic attacks. I went and had some counselling for that, which helped. But my boss had been to Kupua Monastery in the Central Hawke's Bay, and so he encouraged me to do it. So I did. Middle of winter, went and stayed in the rickety little hermitage down the back of the monastery, did it the most extreme way I possibly could, folded into their prayer rhythm, the Liturgy of the Hours, and fell in love with it as a way to pray the Psalms. I memorized the Hail Mary out of respect to them. I'd cross my fingers, but just nothing's going to happen, but it's not evil, but it's just useless. But so I'll pray it with them out of respect. Coming back from that, and then I'd visit Kupua each year. And from there, I just started reading more Catholic stuff, probably, than my own traditions. And over time, that just kept forming me. I was a big fan of Pope Benedict XVI. His Jesus of Nazareth series, 3 books, are amazing, particularly the one on Holy Week. I thought was phenomenal. Some of the best stuff on Jesus that I've ever read. And he didn't give the floor to Mary. I'm like, here's the Pope writing some of the most phenomenal stuff about Jesus that I've ever read. And that shifted my perspective. Wasn't going to become Catholic when I'd read that book, but it just shifted my perspective. And then we hit 2020 and COVID.
Yep.
And so I was leading a small church through COVID during that time. My church was relatively easy. They were happy to follow the rules. They didn't kick back. We said as a church, we'll follow the rules. It's only going to be for a time. It won't be forever. So they were really good. But I also had a voice in the public square as a Christian and voice support for the government. And so...
How did that go?
Oh, it didn't go well. So there was pushback, plenty of pushback. And then 2022, I was involved in the mess of another big church, which was a really stressful year. And then in 2023, towards the end of the year, my daughter's health tanked. And to cut a long story short, we ended up needing to go to Germany to get surgery to save her life. And I had a moment sitting at my kitchen table. I'd get up at 5 a.m. to pray and spend time in silence. And I was sitting at my kitchen table. It was dark, had candle lit, and I had my monastic diurnal open, which is a pre-Vatican II Liturgy of the Hours, the way the old school monks used to pray it, all the Psalms through the week, which says a whole lot about where I was at with Catholicism.
Yeah, I don't have one of those, just to be clear. Yeah.
I know. And I just couldn't pray it. I felt extremely angry. I don't often feel rage, but I'd say I felt rage. And in my rash feeling, I offered God an ultimatum, which...
Yeah, not usually a good idea.
No, against all my theological training, all my instinct, I said to him, if you don't heal her in the next 48 hours, I'm walking away from all of it.
Wow.
I don't know what I'd do, but I'm just going to walk away. And I chose 48 hours in a split second because I thought he probably needs longer than 24 hours. But 48 hours puts me into Sunday and leading the Sunday service, so it needs to be done by then. 48 hours comes and it goes. It doesn't happen. So I turn up at church on Sunday. I smile to everybody as I greet them as they come in the door. They all know what's going on with my daughter. They're all really, really supportive. Lead the liturgy. And again, the church was liturgical because of my brush with Catholicism before we planted it. We get to Holy Communion, and I've had Sundays where I would turn up and not want to be there, but by the time we'd get to Holy Communion, the liturgy would have done its job, and I'd feel like I was present and in that. It was the only Sunday where I didn't feel like that. It just felt empty as I handed out the bread and the wine, and again smiled, the body of Christ given for you, blood of Christ shed for you. It just felt empty. We went to Germany, and we weren't there as tourists, but we spent time in Frankfurt, Leipzig, and Dusseldorf for my daughter. And I needed space just to de-stress most days because I was anxious. And all of those cities have spires everywhere, church spires.
Yeah.
It's wonderful. So I'd go walking to these churches and I'd just sit in them. Didn't want to pray. I didn't even take a Bible to open. But I would sit in those churches, and all of them were either Catholic, or if they're old enough, they were Catholic before the Reformation, had converted to Lutheranism since. So all the beautiful architecture, the stained glass windows telling stories, the statues. If it was a Catholic church, there might be a relic there. So I'd go in and I'd read everything that was available, and then I'd just sit. And it gave me things to focus on without having to conjure up a feeling or make some sort of faith response to everything. And the statues of Mary, they didn't sing to me or anything, but they just caught my attention. I noticed them. We get back from Germany, and I still can't read. I read my Bible. I still don't want to pray. And I had an evening in my office where I just felt a bit sad about that. This is central to my life. And so with those a couple of those statues in mind, having memorized the Hail Mary, I thought, well, she feels approachable, and it can't hurt to I'm going to get teary. It can't hurt to ask her for help. And so I prayed quite an earnest Hail Mary.
Not with the fingers crossed this time.
Not with the fingers crossed.
Right. Yeah.
With a hope.
Yeah.
Not a lot really invested in it. Just the hope that if she is involved in this somehow, that she might help. And I felt a presence. Again, this sort of stuff is often faint. It's hard to put into words. It's just a sense. But I had a sense of a presence. It felt gentle. It felt warm. It felt comforting. And I've had experiences before that I would call the Holy Spirit. This was different in that for some reason that I still can't put my finger on, it felt feminine. I thought it was feminine. My atheist friends have said it was probably a figment of your imagination. It's like, yeah, I can understand why you see it like that. I've had a raging fundamentalist tell me it was probably a demon. But what happened a week later is the antidote to that idea. I parked it because I'm a Protestant minister who's just prayed a Hail Mary, had what I believe is a gentle experience of Mary. That's awkward. My faith container, I think, could awkwardly hold it, but it was still awkward. A week later, without thinking about it during the week or trying to push it, I felt like I could turn back to Jesus again, open my Bible, and just pray to him. And in good Mariology, she's just done what any good Catholic thinks is her job, pointed the way back to her son.
That's right.
So that just opened the door for an emotional journey, not just an intellectual journey.
It's such a beautiful story. And there's a couple of things, if you don't mind, observation. A really good friend, a really good friend of mine who's a good priest friend of mine, he used to talk about cathedral architecture and how the purpose of the architecture is to draw you up. And he said often what happens with cathedrals is in these cities is that the visitors, when they're there, like, well, I'll go to that one. That's got the big spire. I'll go to the cathedral. And people of all walks of life, on all different stages of journey, come into cathedrals because they're stunning pieces of architecture and, you know, they've got nice stained glass windows. And he talked about how he would see people lost in the rafters, that the architecture, the symbols, the smells and the bells, which is what we say in, you know, the Catholic tradition, sort of draw you up and make you go, I wonder what else. I wonder. The fact that you had that kind of experience, and then you look to Mary, you look to Our Lady, you look to the statues there, in effect, the cathedral, in effect, sort of drawing you up and going, a bit of an experience here, but drawing you up towards Christ, towards God. Like that's the orientation. And it's just as you tell that story, it's like these different kind of cathedrals in your life that seem to have these moments where it's beyond the intellectual. It's not just, I can rationalize the discussion and Aquinas says this and Augustine says that, but it's actually an emotional and it's a personal experience. I think it's very beautiful. Yeah, and I want to,
let's linger there for a second because I think there are some really good points there for those who are exploring. Beauty. Those cathedrals are an invitation. And in a materialist world, we're told that beauty and what we're feeling is just these hormones and things firing off in our body, and that beauty, there's nothing real there. Whereas you go back to the likes of Plato, for instance, who would say that beauty has an objectivity to it that connects to something other.
Yes.
And so that beauty, that thing that we're responding to and that thing that we're feeling is an invitation. So for people who are exploring, you might not have all the intellectual stuff there, but I would say lean into that encounter with beauty to say that it is something real. It's not just the subjective feeling that you're having.
I think it's absolutely right. So as you were on that journey, I'm keen to think about where were there particular questions that were coming to you which you were answering or not wanting to answer or delaying answering that were coming to you at that time. You're having these experiences. You're obviously in this professional Christian, as you said before, and that's going to have some complications to it. Were there particular questions that you found you couldn't ignore, even though you maybe tried to resist them at first?
Yeah, the authority of the Bishop of Rome. If you end up saying yes to that and you're sitting somewhere else, a conscience thing comes into play. If you say yes, the Bishop of Rome does have the authority, and the magisterium has the authority, and you're sitting somewhere else, but you're saying that that's true, then there's a call to submit to that. So that is one to hold out there. Almost everything else, as a Wesleyan, again, I could probably awkwardly hold, not
Right.
necessarily own up to every other minister, but I could probably awkwardly hold the idea that Mary is there helping. The communion of saints, you could possibly go down that track a little and just dip your toes in it. I was a hair's breadth for a very long time from transubstantiation,
Right.
making sure that I was always fitting within the Wesleyan theological framework, but getting as close as I possibly could to that. So those are the big ones. But the Bishop of Rome. But because I knew that that was the central one, I didn't hold it back. That was probably the one that I
Got to
dove into the
sort
most.
that one out because so many other things come from
Yeah.
that. And was it if you don't mind me asking, in terms of was there an argument that convinced you? Was it something that you read? Was it for me? When I've explained to friends of mine who are from other Christian denominations, and they say, "Oh, but Jesus said, you know."
Yeah.
You are the rock, and on this rock I'll build my church. He was referring to himself and little rock and big rock and all of these aspects. And to me, I was saying, well, if we go a little bit further into do you want to go to the Aramaic or the Greek or the Latin? And for some people, that's really what they could connect with. For others, it was, but you agree that St. Peter was given the ability to bind on earth. And then if he passes that on, he's binding it on earth. Therefore, papal succession kind of follows.
Yeah.
Was it anything like that, or was it just something else that struck you which helped you get over that question?
Yeah, no, for me, that is a sequence of questions, or was a sequence of questions. First, was Peter given the role of chief among the apostles? And I think there are multiple verses that point us in that direction. I think once you see it in the New Testament, you can't unsee it.
Yeah.
So, and there's a lot of Protestant New Testament scholars who would affirm that Peter had a very central place. Then it's just a question of what's the nature of that authority. So was Peter given the role of chief? What is the nature of that authority? And then the question is, does that role have a succession to it? Was it baked into it, or did it end with Peter?
Right.
And then if you answer the affirmative to that, so where is the succession for that? And then what is the relationship between Peter and the other apostles? So what is the relationship between whoever his successor is and the others? So I ended up in the affirmative. Eric Ibarra's book, The Papacy, which is a fat tome, that was one of the keys for me. He examined the historical record right back to Peter and the first popes, but also what the Eastern and Western Church have been saying to each other ever since. How did it operate? He was very sympathetic to the arguments of the Eastern Orthodox Church, which is good because I had a leaning towards Eastern Orthodoxy, but he still lands on the side of the papacy. So that book for me was central. But then listening to lots of stuff like Catholic Answers Live, I found extremely good. People like Joe Heschmeyer, Trent Horn, Jimmy Aiken, those guys were really good. So I'd watch a lot of Joe in particular on YouTube. And I really appreciated the work of Gavin Ortland, Protestant minister. And so watching those people discuss stuff back and forth, along with a whole lot of other stuff that I was reading, people that I was talking to on both sides, yeah, it just ended up being in the space where I couldn't deny the papacy. I couldn't deny the experience that I'd had of Mary. And then transubstantiation ended up falling in one mass that I went along to. Uh, yeah, so there was a whole lot of thinking going on and a big emotional journey in play as well.
I love how we talk about faith and reason, being both together like two lungs, and it's like that sense of you engaging both. It's that the faith, the experience connected with reason. Was there something, anything that felt genuinely risky about letting yourself consider Catholicism?
Yeah, I mean, again, I was in a denomination that I loved. I knew I was going to disappoint people if I made that jump. My family is not Catholic. My wife is not Catholic. She is deeply Wesleyan. She's deeply Methodist, strong Methodist history in her family. We had said to the congregation that I was in, at the point that I resigned, just because of burnout, that I was going to be remaining a Wesleyan minister. This stuff was starting to tick away, but not to the point where I felt like, oh, I'm going to have to become Catholic. And the denomination that I was a part of were amazing to us. If I think about my daughter's health, if I think about the COVID era, if I think about 2022 and the church issue that I was involved in, if I think about the times where I've said stuff in public that other ministers might have had a go at, my national superintendent had my back. And that denomination supported us. We needed to raise $200,000 to get my daughter to Germany. That denomination was a significant part of that. People within that denomination were a significant part of that. So I had to deal with the sense of guilt as well, because I'd like to think that I'm very loyal. And I was loyal to them. And I knew that if I made that jump, they were going to be disappointed. I thought that I might lose the gig that I have on Life FM. It's not financial, but it's still a community that I love. So being able to appear on Life FM and Rema weekly, like, would I lose that? How would people respond to it? If the congregation that I was a part of find out, like, how will they feel about it? I thought I was going to get attacked. And I thought I was going to lose a lot. So it was which is why it had to be a long, careful journey.
So you're talking about really this wrestling with the discernment to become Catholic or not. And you've mentioned before, I think it was Father Justin Lee was someone who you sort of spoke to.
Yeah.
And so there's this element, I'd love to explore that, because there's a lot at risk from what you're describing. It's not an easy decision. Maybe it's not an easy decision for anyone when they're sort of coming to it at a different stage of their life. But I'd love to hear about that. Like, you've talked about this from an emotional, from a spiritual, from an intellectual standpoint. What were the moments? What were the people who, when you connected with, that really made an impact?
Yeah, thanks for asking, because in the conversations that I've had, I don't often get to mention the people, because everybody's interested in the theological ideas and the experiences. But the people were significant. If I think about Catholics along the way, I had a friend many years ago, a listener to Life FM. I can't remember why I was outside the St. Patrick's Cathedral in Auckland, but I was once, and he was there. I can't remember what was going on. He gave me a catechism. I glanced at it every now and then for years, but never took it very seriously. A couple of years ago, picked it up and just started reading it a whole lot more seriously because it was on my shelf. So I owe Sean something. There was another guy, Regia Hall, who took me along to an adoration service in Ponsonby. Had the guts just to invite me to an adoration service, this guy on the radio. So I went along with him, and again, didn't know what I really thought about what was going on, but the silence, the incense, the kneeling, I adored it. It was magnificent.
That's what it says on the label. That's right.
I think about Kathy Jenke, who was an announcer on Rema for many years, just watching her faithfully operate as a Catholic within a Protestant environment. And then her conversations with me sometimes, especially 2015 when I almost converted, meant a whole lot to me. I think about people like Tim and Rachel Wilson, and Tim has been extremely good to me along the journey. Peter Wolfkamp, who's been in my orbit for a long time too, he fills in for me on a Sunday night when I can't do my show on ZB. Pete's always been wonderful. Garth Bray, another wonderful Catholic man, has been magnificent. And then I got into the orbit of Damien Walker from the studio of St. Philomena, who does art and statues for Catholic churches around the country and now around the world. And Damien and I had liked each other's stuff on Instagram, which just kind of evolved into a friendship. And I was down in Christchurch, and so he booked an hour for me with Father Justin Lee from the Brothers of St. John.
Mm-hmm.
By then, I had met Bishop Richard. Bishop Richard was really good when I reached out to him, sat down, and we just talked about what it would look like if I did make the jump over. What would my life look like? But I got to the point where I was on the affirmative with a whole lot of stuff, but I didn't know what was going to be the thing, or how would I make the final decision. So I sat down with Father Justin Lee, and he gave me a couple of hours. He just patiently, like you are right now, listened to me blab on about my story, and he just kept asking good pastoral questions. And I think I got to the point where I asked him, how do I make the decision? Because there's a lot at stake. And he said, when we say the creed, we declare that we believe in the one holy Catholic and apostolic church. And he effectively said, one, you can intellectually get there. Catholic, it's a universal, you can get there. That's easy. In the Cathedral, the whole world's present in Hamilton on a Sunday. Apostolic succession, you can get there intellectually. But he said you have to experience holiness. And until you experience holiness, don't come over. Which was somewhat reflective of all the Catholics I'd encountered. There was no sense of ever trying to pull me into the Catholic Church, maybe apart from Sean, right at the beginning. I think wanted me to convert the whole way through.
Here's a catechism. Yeah, that's right.
So I took that, and in my head I'm like, yeah, but feeding the poor is a holy thing. Sitting around at a table with friends and then laughing and enjoying food together is a holy thing. Sitting with someone who's sick or grieving, that's a holy thing. There are loads of ways I can encounter holiness, but that he really seemed to emphasize that sense that you've got to know, you've got to experience it. So we would always go along to, my wife and I, the Catholic Mass at Christmas, because it started at 7:30, done by 8:30, and then you've got all of Christmas Day.
Efficiency. That's what we like to do.
Yeah,
right.
and the Filipinos sing Happy Birthday Jesus,
Yep.
which is magnificent.
Yep.
So my wife and I would often joke now that it's not Christmas unless we've sung Happy Birthday Jesus at the
Okay,
Cathedral.
fair enough. Yep.
And I'd started going to the 7:30 Mass fairly regularly on a Sunday.
But you're still not Catholic at this point.
Still not Catholic. And I decide the week after Christmas, so the Feast of the Holy Family, that I want to go to the 10:30 Mass to experience what that's like, because that would be the big one.
Yeah, brace yourself. Here you go.
At the 7:30 Mass, I would always sit down the back because in the phase that I was in, I wanted to reflect on the Pharisee and the publican, or the Pharisee and the tax collector, depending on your interpretation. With the tax collector, the one down the back who's sitting there, doesn't feel like he's worthy. Lord, have mercy on me. And if you sit down the back at the 7:30, that's a wonderful devotional space. You have people who might have done bad stuff on Friday, Saturday, just working stuff out with Jesus down the back, and maybe a few people who come in late. There's always space. So I walked in early like I always do, so I can have time that's quiet, and I sit down the back at the 10:30 Mass. Everything in front of me fills up.
Yeah, every Catholic knows where you're going with this. Yeah, that's right.
I know. Everything in front of me fills up. And then it starts to fill up around me. Parents with little children, clearly nervous about their child's noise, sit down the back. So just to anybody, and I encourage you, as someone who is a minister as well, who would have little children around, bring your children up the front where they can see what's happening. And if other people are annoyed by that, stuff them.
100%. I speak for all Catholics when
Yes.
including. No, it's one of those things where I think it's something. When my children were young, and it was that sense of, and I'm from a big family. We were always, at the back. But the best priests were the ones who would always make the point. No, I'm. It's not disturbing at all to have them running around and doing stuff. It's the vitality in the church that's this thing to be celebrated.
Yeah, and then when you have them there, they take the liturgy in by osmosis.
Yeah, they can see what's going on.
Becomes part of them.
So you're starting to get surrounded by the families.
Yeah, families and all the latecomers.
Yes,
they start to file past me. They're looking for every little space they can, so I have to move around regularly to make space. And then it's standing room only, so there are people standing standing down the back as well. Nobody seemed to complain about that, which struck me. The liturgy starts, and I can't hear it because of the noise, the hubbub. I'm the only middle-aged white guy sitting down the back. And if anybody had looked at me, I would have looked like I had a stupid grin on my face. Because man, if Jesus was sitting in this cathedral, this is where he would be. Still hadn't quite hit the moment where I'm like, this is holiness. We get to the end of the Mass, and at the end of the Mass, I will always go and sit with the statue of Mary just to honour her for saving my faith, that experience. So I went and sat there. There's a big nativity set up during Christmas between that little chapel and the sanctuary. Mm-hmm. And as I'm sitting there, people just start filing up to that nativity set. Nobody's told them to do it. They're not getting any merit points in heaven for doing it. Not officially. But people start filing up. They start having their photos taken with the nativity.
Yeah.
All these selfies and other people taking their photos, and they're all smiling, families standing together, friends standing together. I see parents holding their toddlers and their babies, telling them stories. I see people coming up and children touching the feet of the baby Jesus and Mary and Joseph. There are two little girls that came up and just waved at them with joy on their face. And watching that popular devotion, I felt like I had just encountered holiness. Like I felt it.
Yeah.
I wasn't intellectualizing it. I felt it. And I felt in that moment that I'd gone from asking the church to prove itself to me to asking it to teach me through them. And it was in that moment that I made the decision that I had to become Catholic. And I got in touch with Bishop Richard, and I told him. And he said, before you send the email to resign, because I'd said that was what I was going to do from my position as an ordained minister, he said, I want you to come around with your wife because I want to hear Malva's thoughts and feelings about this.
Because this was going to be my next question is, what's the journey like with your family and your friends, and particularly your wife? Like, what was that like at that point? So Bishop Richard jumped straight to it and said, bring her around.
Yeah, and she really appreciated it. And she said, if you'd gone Anglican or Presbyterian, chances are nobody would have asked for that. They might have, but that wasn't our sense at the time. So Bishop Richard inviting us around for dinner, cooking us Australian eye fillet steak, I think, on the barbecue, showing me, no, I won't say what he showed me, but he cooked the steak, and then he complained about the steak because it was Australian. This is a good man. And he listened to her. And then that week I sent the email, and it was a very, very hard email to send. There was a grief in sending that email, knowing I was going to disappoint very, very good friends. But my conscience had got me to that place where this is the thing that saved my faith. I'm in love with it. It is beautiful. And it's where I need to be, and I need to submit to my bishop, and my bishop is connected to the Bishop of Rome. Yeah, and the journey with my family my wife has been very, very good. Back when I had a panic in 2015 and I just blurted it out of nowhere, she very quickly just went to, how are we going to make this work? Practically working it out.
Fantastic.
She's not going to convert. And very similar this time as well. I can't remember where the first conversation where I said, I'm seriously thinking about doing this, because we talk about this stuff all the time. But right along, she's been good. She was gracious enough to come along to all the RCIA classes with me so that she could learn for herself as well. And often afterwards, the discussions we would have would not be what we had discussed at RCIA, it would be other things. And she would ask questions like, so how did you get to where you've got to with transubstantiation? How did you get to where you've got to with the communion of saints? Sacraments. Those were really good conversations. So she understands a whole lot better now why and how my thinking shifted. And it's opened her up to some other thinking about the church as well. But she's been wonderfully gracious. So on a Sunday now, I go to 7:30 Mass at the Cathedral. And I go to the Cathedral for practical reasons so that I can go to 7:30 Mass. It's done by 8:30. I have about an hour and a half off, and then I go to church with her at the church that I used to lead. And they are wonderful, but it is still very much her community. So that's where we go.
There's something about that, when you're talking about your discernment and that process, and obviously, with your wife's support, but also her inquiry, her questions about how did you get to there, and the same things I've been asking you as well, because I think showing you're working,
Yeah.
not just giving the answer at the end, I think is really important. Everyone's journey is going to be quite different. Their way of discerning is going to be quite different. God is going to speak to them in totally different ways. Did you feel there were moments in that discernment where God was talking to you? Was that like, okay, this is the moment? Not that the angel Gabriel appeared in your room and said, hey, this is what the story is. Haven't heard that happening other than once. But were there moments where you in the discernment process where you're like, oh, yeah, there's something here?
Yeah, there are a number of moments. And again, for anybody who might be exploring, as I talk about these moments, I don't want them to feel like they have to have these sort of moments.
Important, yeah.
For some people, it is an intellectual journey. For others, it is an emotional journey. For others, it is a relational journey. I do want to mention one person here who hasn't got a mention yet, and it's less about an experience that I had and more about an experience that he had. So my sponsor, the person who supported me in the journey formally into the church, was a guy called Daniel Story. He's a chaplain for the tertiary students in Auckland. Daniel and I had, through my work with CBA, had been in each other's orbit a little bit, but we had not spent a lot of time together. And I'm aware that at some point, when I was in the middle of this, without him having any clue that it was happening, he just felt like he was supposed to talk to me. So turned up one time at CBA. Wasn't aware of the kind of conversation that he wanted to have. So I just sat him down in a space where the team was kind of milling around, and he didn't feel like he could have the conversation because it might be outing me in some way. He didn't know, but he just felt like he was supposed to have that conversation. And I ended up asking Daniel to be my sponsor because he had had that experience. I had loads of people that I could pick from who would have been fantastic, but his sense of call in that conversation. So not only is it about the explorer listening to the promptings, it's about those Catholics in the orbit of the explorer listening to their promptings as well, so that you go on the journey with the person who's exploring. But yeah, for me, transubstantiation, intellectually I'd got there with Greek concepts around ousia, the substance changing. Yeah, that's
a whole thing.
That's a
I remember talking with a friend of mine when he was asking about it. And he's like, I don't get it, it doesn't change. And I said, well, I just like to think about it as though, imagine you have glasses that enable you to see into the realm of the divine, like not in the physical world, but into the realm of the divine. And at that moment, what you would see is the substance of the thing rather than the accident of the thing that we see. And so in that way, what you would see is before transubstantiation, it would be the same substance as the loaf of bread from Tip Top.
Yeah.
And after transubstantiation, it's the exact same substance as what you would see if Christ was standing there and you were staring at him. Yeah. And we can't perceive it, but we can believe that that's exactly what's going on.
It's the beingness. So I had all that, but I still wasn't quite there. But I went along to Mass, and I was sitting down the back, and there was just a moment when the priest prayed over the elements. It was probably Father Darren, who now is a friend, prayed over the elements, and I just had this moment where the thought hit me: he's in the room now. There's the sense that Jesus is always present through the Holy Spirit. If God withdrew his breath from creation, all creation would cease to exist, according to the words of Elihu in the book of Job. But so there's that general presence of Jesus. But when we talk about the Eucharist, there's the particular presence of Jesus. And embodiment and physicality became really big for me through this whole journey. Statues, relics, the popular devotion with that nativity set. So the height of that is the Eucharist. It is the source and it is the summit of that. And I had a moment where I thought, he's in the room. And it just struck me how big that is. And I was sitting there down the back, not able to take it because following the rules, as someone who had always preached an open table. I had to really grapple with that. In that moment, thinking, he's here in the room, he's up there. There's nothing that I have to do. So the whole faith works thing, in my mind, is redundant. because this is entirely a gift of grace. I don't have to, it's not based on my faith. He's not turning up because I've got any sense of faith.
You don't earn it.
It's not even because of the priest. That was sorted out in the first few hundred years of the church.
That's
in
right.
an argument. I don't have to feel anything. This is just not on me, and he's here. And if he's really here, if this really is our Savior, just sitting in the room with him is enough. Being able to take this will be a bonus, but just to sit here together, without him saying anything, without me saying anything, we just get to sit together. It caught me, and transubstantiation flipped there. So the intellectual got melded to the emotional. So there was that. Then there was Holy Week. So well after I'd made the decision, we got into Holy Week. Again, it was largely watching other people's faith play out. I remember Palm Sunday. And I'd encourage anybody who's thinking about the faith, feel free to take your time, but when you hit Holy Week for next Easter, go along to everything.
Yeah.
We did Palm Sunday outside. We've all got the palms. The reading of the palms happens. Jesus entering Jerusalem. And then we all go inside and the service starts and we get to the reading of the Passion, which is the start of Holy Week. And everybody stands for the gospel reading, which in and of itself is a wonderful thing. The reverence of the gospel. Jesus is being presented here, so we stand. And it's a long passage, so everybody's standing for this really long passage. Starts with the Last Supper, works its way through to Jesus' crucifixion, burial. And we're all standing, and Andrea, who was reading the passage, and the priest was being the voice of Jesus, and there are other voices, get to the moment where Jesus dies on the cross. And Andrea, with no emotional fanfare, nothing to make it happen, says, "We kneel." Packed cathedral. There's probably over 1,000 people there, close to it. You just hear the sound of this whole auditorium kneeling. It's just this whoosh, and I was just awestruck. It was amazing. And then we get to the Chrism Mass on Tuesday, which for me was bigger than the Easter Saturday service. The Chrism Mass, for those who don't know, is where all the priests of the diocese turn up and they renew their vows up the front. All the oils that are going to be taken to the parishes for the sacraments, they all get blessed and they get taken. And our diocese covers from, I don't know, Huntly, bordering Auckland somewhere, all the way down to Tūrangi, across to Gisborne, across to Raglan. Like, it is a big geographical area. So the priests all come, they turn up, they're up on the stage, and there's a moment where they're all renewing their vows. And I stopped and I thought, before I handed in my resignation, if the Wesleyan Church had had a service like this, I would have been up there. I'm not that anymore. And being a Reverend Frank Ritchie in the media space was a huge part of my identity. And in that moment, I let it go and got a bit teary and had to fight back ugly tears. So there was a lot of breathing going on. Thankfully, there was nobody else immediately around me. And we got to the end, and the song we sung at the end was "Be Still My Soul." And all the lyrics, I've written in the back of my prayer diary because the lyrics just meant so much in that moment. But that grief was good, it was holy, and it was a moment of change. And then Good Friday, I finished my radio show at 3 p.m. on News Talk ZB, broadcasting for 3 hours. 3:09, I turn up at the cathedral and make my way into the hall because the cathedral's full. Watch it on a screen, didn't feel like much of anything. But then everybody filed into a door at the cross. And watching people just line up so that they could walk up and kneel at the cross or kiss it, that meant so much as well. Those were big moments.
It's beautiful to hear it through your eyes. Like when I sort of think about the Easters that I've been to in my life, and there's a sense of, it's the reading of the Passion, it's going to be long, or it's like, Holy Thursday, the washing the feet, I don't want to be the one that they pick, and you kind of got all these things which I think you take for granted as a Catholic, and to hear it with new eyes, look through that perspective, it does make you reconsider the actions that we take and the reasons why we take them, and the Triduum.
Yeah.
It was only even a few years ago that it really, a priest was explaining to me, it's one liturgy.
Yeah.
It's not like we have
Yes.
Holy Thursday and then we have Good Friday and then we have
Yeah.
Easter Saturday. It's actually the continuation and the culmination. It's like the Super Bowl rolled in with the NBA Finals, with the the Football World Cup all at the same time, and it's an incredible experience.
Yeah.
Which I think never has failed to move me, even after all these years.
That's good.
But to hear your journey through that and your perception of it and what you were letting go of and what you were at the same time gaining is, I think, a very beautiful thing.
Which brings, I'd totally forgotten about the Thursday evening.
Yeah.
Where Jesus the host is taken around to the altar of repose, and there was this, I think it's a Teze song
Yep.
that we sung, asking us to stay with him and to
Yeah.
pray with him.
Yeah.
That was incredibly
Remain here
moving.
with me. Yeah.
Again, very embodied, very tangible, and I can understand if you've been around for a while, it can feel like, there's just all these things that we have to do. C.S. Lewis once described in a letter that he wrote to Catholics about reunion. He said, you Catholics, when you look at us Protestants, you probably see a desert, I'm paraphrasing here, where it feels like we've stripped away so much of the faith. Like there's next to nothing there. But when we look at you, we feel like you've added so much to the faith, it's like a jungle. I've got to the space where I want the jungle. Like I want everything. I want all the noise. I want all the bells, the whistles, the incense, the long readings, the standing, the sitting, the kneeling. I want all of that, because all of that is a gift.
Yes.
The Catholic Church is this massive plethora of stuff that you have access to.
Yeah.
That is a gift. Again, it's a gift of grace. If I think, man, I really want to understand silence, Catholic Church has a place for me to go. If I've got questions and I've got doubts, the last 2,000 years have given me the greatest minds to tap into. If I want a physical experience, walk into a mass. If I've got something that I need to offload, that I've done that I feel bad about, I don't just have to sit in my room on my own trying to feel better with Jesus about that. I can go and I can talk to a priest, and I can hear the priest say, you are forgiven. It's powerful stuff, and it's all there for a reason.
It is. I totally agree. And I think that's one of that connection to the communion of the saints, that some of the saints would focus on a particular charism of Christ, of God, and that focus. So the Marists and the Dominicans and the Jesuits and the Augustinians, and you can go through this list of people who are saying, I'm going to focus on this particular aspect of the jungle, if you like. And for me, in my own journey, I found through my childhood and then into teenagers and then to young adult and not so young now, there's been different parts of the church that have been there for what I've needed at the time. There have been points where I want the intellectual discussion, let's really get into it, and others it's been like, I need the silence, and I'll have that. And the fact that it's all on offer means that we are, for the most part, pretty fickle creatures.
Yes.
One of the things I love about, not just because of the association, but because of the family association, but things like Christian Broadcasting and others who have then said, you know what, we'll fill the airwaves with good news. And you go, you know what, sometimes I need that at 2:27 in the afternoon. I want to turn there we go. I get a little bit of a message, a little bit of a reminder. And I think it's that writ large. That's what the church is trying to offer, is constant reminder, constant little sign, little single, a bell, a picture, a statue. It's to draw you back, because we get distracted now more than ever.
Yeah.
And I think it's that ability to reconnect us, to recollect us is, I think, what's so important.
And it's big on every level. So the communion of the saints, which I know that a lot of Protestants find awkward. I found it awkward once upon a time. But again, when I was going through some hard times, I'd have friends who were praying for me. But then the idea that there's this bigger cloud of witnesses that I can ask to pray for me as well, it's phenomenal. I can ask my friend Rob to pray for me, and I can ask the angel Gabriel to pray for me, and I can ask Saint Anthony of the Desert with all the struggles that he went through wrestling with demons and sin. I can ask, when I'm having a struggle, I can ask him to pray for me. The idea that all of that becomes accessible. There's this wonderful passage in Hebrews 12 where the writer is contrasting the mountain that the Israelites came to, mountain where there'd be trembling and it'd be fearful. And then he says in Hebrews 12, but this is what you have access to, and millions of angels, the gathering of the firstborn, the elect of the firstborn. I can't remember the exact translation, and the souls of the just made perfect. Like there's this huge realm that we have access to. It's like, why would I not access that? So again, give me the jungle.
So if you're wrestling with these questions, and some of these questions, you want to ask them and get honest answers. What made it feel safe enough for you to ask these questions in an honest way?
Yeah, again, people. So Daniel had a connection to CEC, Catholic Inquiry Centre, and particularly Carly, who oversees it, and her husband, Wayne. And Carly and Wayne had been on a relatively similar journey to me, but a number of years ago. And so Daniel connected me to them. And then Carly and Wayne were really generous about, because they were down in Christchurch, they jumped onto Zoom with me and gave me a whole bunch of their time, which I was really, really grateful for. And for me at that point, because I'm a self-starter, it was less about asking theological questions of other people, and it was more about hearing the journey of other people. So I was happy to pick up books, wrestle with the catechism, do that intellectual stuff on my own. But I wanted to hear how others had been through the process. So Carly and Wayne had been through the process. Wayne had worked for a Christian ministry.
Yeah.
So hearing the journey that they went on, especially as husband and wife, was really important to me as well. So I was really grateful for their time. And then Carly connected me with a guy called Mike Beard in Hamilton. We sat down and had coffee together. And it was really significant for me to meet someone in Hamilton. So I had Catholic friends and I'd met the bishop, but all my Catholic friends lived outside of Hamilton. I didn't actually know any Catholics in Hamilton. So I was rocking up to Mass, again, not because I had any relational connection, didn't know anybody. When I started the journey at Lent, I knew when I started the formal journey at Lent, I knew sort of the other RCIA people, but I didn't know anybody in the congregation when we stood in front of the congregation and they were kind of showing these are the people who are going on the journey. So those relational connections were really significant. So I was really grateful for Carly and Wayne giving their time and really grateful for that connection to someone in Hamilton. Now, Mike and I have only caught up over coffee once. He's got to shout the next one because I shouted that one. But just having local connection was really important.
I also love about how you're talking through your story, the faceted, multi-channel aspect to it. So you're talking about people like Jimmy Aiken on one end, you've got Carly and the team at CEC at the other, you've got the individual people you're meeting who are local, you've got your own searching that you're doing through the writings of the saints, so there's this sense I think for people who are inquiring, who are searching, that if they're not getting the answers they need to be able to ask those honest questions, is to keep searching, is to keep looking, because there is different sort of ways to try and connect with. And depending on what those questions are, might depend on whether it's better asked to a friend or whether it's asked to someone who's a theologian or whether it's a book that you need to spend some time with as well.
Yeah, and look, if you've got the guts to do it, if you walk into your local parish or something like the Cathedral, there's one person who's always very identifiable. It's the priest.
Yeah.
And the priest, most priests, I think, would be well up for a conversation with someone who's exploring. They're not these kind of intimidating CEOs. If you walk into a church and you can't identify anybody else to talk to, just make a beeline for that person. Let them know that you're exploring and give them your contact details and take it from there.
Yeah, brilliant. At what point did Catholicism start feeling less like their church and more like something where you felt you could actually belong?
It's probably, there was that experience where I felt like the church was now teaching me, but it was probably it would have been during Lent, really starting that formal process, standing up in front of the congregation alongside others. And technically, that's for people who are getting baptized. I was baptized when I was 1 year old. But in the Cathedral, they invite everybody up to be part of that. And you get gifted the Lord's Prayer, you get gifted the Apostles' Creed, the cross, and the congregation gets to see you for the first time. So that's where it really started to shift into, this is going to be my church now. Now, that you can pull out at any point up until that Easter Vigil service where the commitment is really made, where you make the declaration. So it's probably really only now that it's starting to feel like my church, but that will bed itself in more with relationship, I think. Again, there's the commitment to Catholicism, but then there's the development of relationship as a Catholic. And that is a much longer journey.
Yeah, a lifetime journey, that one. What were the first real experiences once you had become Catholic? So you'd entered the church, you were in full communion with the church.
Yeah.
What were the particular experiences of Catholic life that felt, I don't know, shall we say, strange? What confused you? Was it about the Mass or the prayer or the saints? And what confused you? And on the other end, what unexpectedly moved you now that you're in the club?
I would say that, again, this will probably be different for people who are exploring faith for the first time, as opposed to someone like me who's very familiar with liturgy, very familiar with sort of familiar with the environment, familiar with the form of the environment. But I'm coming from a particular type of church culture, and I've grown up around Protestant circles. And in my lifetime, thanks to my mother, have done the breadth of the Protestant faith. So I don't like them all equally, but I feel like I understand them all and can fit within them all, whether it be High Anglican, Pentecostal, middle of the road Baptist. I feel comfortable there. Catholicism is a whole other culture in terms of how you build relationship, how community's done, right down to how people act before and after a service. All of that is still relatively foreign. So I'm doing what I do, and I'll start something myself and draw people into my orbit, and it'll go from there. But the culture is very, very different. So the question of how do you make friends, I think is live and present for me. And if it's live and present for me as someone who can forge a space, then it's going to be very alive and present for someone who's come in because they've just wondered how do you become Catholic, as opposed to they had a friend who invited them along, introduced them to other people.
It's a really important point that I take back from our conversations. There's the sense of as those of us who are in the church, when people are coming in and are searching, how do we make them feel more welcome? How do we not fall into the routine? Sometimes, especially when you're trying to get the kids there and you got to get off to the next thing, and you're not staying for the cup of tea afterwards, and I think those are important moments. But I would be actively encouraging those who are, inquiring and are searching and exploring to reach out to people who are there, because we don't bite. We're not scary. But I can understand how it can seem alien. It can seem different from some of the other denominations in particular, even though there's some common threads that run through it.
On that, when the formal journey happens at Lent, for the congregation, they're going to see those people up the front.
Yes.
Might not have noticed them before,
Yeah.
depending on your congregation size, and the cathedral is big. Cathedral's a whole other culture. But you're going to see them for the first time. That's your chance to identify those people.
Exactly.
Say hello to them.
Yes.
Not just let them walk past you. Say hello to them and welcome them.
I totally agree, and I also think it's a golden opportunity where that situation where you've worked with a person for a while, or you've sort of known them, and it's got past the point where you could probably say, hey, what's your name again? Because it's going to be a bit awkward. You should know their name by now. I think there's those moments where we go, I thought he might have been you, and now he's been introduced. I should go up and say, hey, welcome, congratulations. It's an icebreaker, if nothing else. You've spoken a little bit about this, but what was it like being in the room with the Eucharist when you couldn't go up for communion yourself?
Yeah, initially awkward. And I know you can walk up for a blessing, and I know how to get the blessing. Yep, put the hand over the shoulder. Just as an aside, I'd encourage every church at almost every communion to find a way to let people know that that's what you can do. Because it's not automatic that a visitor knows that that's what you do.
I've noticed that, and some priests are really good at actually reminding everyone that that's the case.
Yeah.
And I've particularly seen it at weddings, where the priest will be very aware of the fact that a whole bunch of people attending won't be Catholic. And so they'll say, hey, look, if you want to come up for a blessing, just cross your chest like this, and so I know. But I think you're absolutely right. That's something which should be said at every Mass.
Yeah. I chose not to do it. Partly because I wanted the awkwardness of just sitting in my seat and being an odd one out. I don't actually know why. It just felt like something that I needed to do.
Felt like it was on brand for you.
So it just felt like something that I needed to do as part of that submission journey, to not look like I'm one of you,
Right.
because I wasn't
Yeah.
at that point. So, and then of course once that emotional reaction to transubstantiation hit, the feeling of it from there shifted quite significantly, and I felt quite happy just to sit there because again I'm in the room with him. Now, it's not that every mass after that had that emotional weight to it, but it had shifted my thinking enough to be we're in the room together. Yeah. So, and at that point, I stopped questioning should everybody be allowed access to this, to just feeling like I was privileged to sit there.
What part of Catholic spirituality or of the rituals or any aspect of it felt the most for you when you experienced it of coming home?
This is going to sound really simple, but I would probably say kneeling.
At a particular point, or just kneeling in general?
Kneeling in general, but kneeling in the mass when the prayer is happening, where Jesus is being offered. Again, the use of our body. We're a very Cartesian society and culture where everything happens in our head. And I need to conjure it up in my head, and my head is the thing that leads everything else. So if I'm anxious or depressed, I need to work out how to think that through to the right thoughts, as opposed to what's going on in my body and how do I respond to what's happening in my body so that my body can lead my mind. So I remember just folding into what everybody else was doing, standing at the right moment, but then kneeling. And kneeling is an act of reverence. It's an act of submission. It's an act of offering ourselves. And so kneeling felt like the thing that led the heart and the mind, probably more than a lot of other stuff.
So when did Catholic teaching stop feeling like it was their theology and started becoming something which was convincing or maybe even beautiful to you?
That's a good question. It's a good question. It's a good question because I had to wrangle with theologically minded friends as well who see it very differently.
Yeah, sure.
So I would sit and read something and go, "That's beautiful.
How good is this?
Look at the way that fits together.
Yeah.
That's amazing." And then I'd sit down with my theologically minded friends. We'd have to wrestle with it for 2 to 3 hours together. And by then I'm drained and I'm like, oh, it's not as beautiful as I thought it was. Not because I stopped being convinced of it, but because I couldn't express it in the way that I had felt like it connected. And my whole life, I've run the danger of thinking, I've got this thing. Everybody else needs to have this thing as well. And everybody else needs to see the world like I see the world. So there's been a journey of humility there going, this is where I'm at. It's not where other people are at. It's not where they have to be at. But the catechism, reading the catechism properly, seeing it come to life, the documents of Vatican II, and I know there's wrangling in the Catholic Church at the moment between your full-blown traditionalist and your anti-Vatican II and anti-Novus Ordo people versus those who are all for it. But the documents of Vatican II are stunning. A church that opens up to the world. The way it understands the priesthood of all believers and people in their jobs consecrating the world through what they do, the way that connects to the priesthood, the organic nature of the priesthood connecting all the way back to Peter and the first apostles and Jesus being alive through all of that. There's that sense of it all being connected together. And so I can't identify the point where it happened, but everything, my faith just started feeling more integrated and whole.
Right.
And again, I'll have Protestant theologically minded friends who could argue me down. Like they could just beat me in an argument, and they would say the same, that their faith is integrated and whole. But for me, it all just came home. No longer, once I made that commitment at the Easter Vigil service, no longer was I drawing from there as part of the smorgasbord and from there as part of the smorgasbord and thinking, oh, you Catholics have a whole lot of practices that are really helpful here. Once those practices and all that theology was connected to its heartbeat, everything just felt like it came together.
You have a beautiful way of phrasing that sense of integration, that sense of the whole. We even talk about cafeteria Catholics, the ones who sort of just pick and choose from inside the faith. But it's that sense of like, no, it's the one holy,
Yes.
Catholic and Apostolic. It's kind of bringing it all together. It's not designed to be sort of sliced and diced.
Yes.
What do you think Protestants, and that's a very broad church in and of itself when I say Protestants, but what do you think Protestants most often misunderstand about Catholics? Or is there anything, and the other way side, that Catholics tend to misunderstand about Protestants as well?
Yeah, I would say probably one of the biggest misunderstandings. Let's put aside the Bishop of Rome for a moment, because that argument has been argued well above my pay grade. The distinction between worship and honor.
Okay.
And I actually think Protestants, my Protestant friends, and I know a number of people have gone down this track, could really benefit from making that distinction. Part of the problem is when you remove the power of the Eucharist and you make the Eucharist just remembering something, you've taken out the key element of what has been the key element of Christian worship for 2,000 years. We say that is worship. That sacrifice being represented, the one holy sacrifice that has taken place and is effective through all ages, gets represented. That is our act of worship. That's entirely biblical. But as soon as you take that away, that distinct thing away, you've got to then say that a whole bunch of other stuff is worship. So if I get on my knees, if I bow to something, I am worshiping. If I pray, I am effectively worshiping. So worship gets flattened out to all these other things, and you lose the distinction between worship and honor. So when you see someone bowing to a statue of Mary, for instance, the Protestant mind says that that is worship. If I say that I am praying to Mary, the mind says that that is worship, as opposed to those two things being an act of honor, because we've got this other thing that only gets done for God.
I really like that distinction. I was just thinking as you were talking about how early on in my career, when I was a young whippersnapper, and we were working in a retail shop, and one of them was seniors. It was an ex-military man, and he took me and one of the other young guys aside and taught us how to tie ties properly, because he wasn't happy with how we tied our ties. And we were asking all these questions about what was it like, when you're in the Navy and things like this. And it sort of blew our minds a bit that you could be this, wet behind the ears first lieutenant, and someone like him who wasn't an officer, been in the Navy for ages, had to salute. And we're like, you have to salute like a 20-year-old? And he said, I'm not saluting the person, I'm saluting the uniform.
Yes.
I'm saluting the rank. And it's the sense of like, I'm honoring the rank. I'm not worshipping the person, I'm not worshipping the thing. It's a connection to that way. And so in the same way, when we think about honoring, is not the same as worship. In my mind, it's kind of they're two totally different things. But I could absolutely see how from the outside looking in, that would be a misconception.
And if you hold the idea that Mary is simply another person,
right,
then to bow, to pray, to ask her to intercede for us, to ask her to pray for us, to think that there's something more going on there that can feel idolatrous. So one of my challenges to my Protestant friends is, even if you don't go as far as me, think about what honoring her really looks like. This is the woman who held the creator of the universe in her womb. Where does he get his human DNA from? He gets it from Mary. That can't help but change her in some way. And then when he ascends again, for those who take those stories very seriously, when he goes back to the Godhead and his humanity has been transfigured in his resurrected self, whose humanity is he taking back into the Godhead? And again, we could go through a bunch of Old Testament scripture about the nature of the Queen and the Queen Mother and who gets honoured as the Queen Mother in the Old Testament. So it just makes sense that very early in the church she took on a role that requires us to honour her. When we honour her, we honour him. Everything we say and do about Mary is ultimately a statement about the greatness of Jesus.
And what about the other way? What about Catholics having misconceptions of Protestants? And I say this in the context of someone who maybe is of a Christian denomination, a Protestant, who is thinking about becoming Catholic. And what do you think are some of the misconceptions that Catholics might have of them, in the sense that they come to the church, they maybe meet a Catholic person and they're sort of talking. What are the misconceptions that they should be aware of that Catholics might have of them?
That's a really good question. I'm probably still learning that one. I think there's a perception among Catholics that all Protestants are anti-Catholic.
Okay.
I think there's still the Council of Trent lingering there. The Council of Trent is actually magnificent when you read its documents, but the people that were anathematized there were the people who had spurned the Catholic Church.
Mm.
They were making a decision to break away. Your average Protestant now isn't thinking a lot about Catholicism. They're thinking about how do you follow Jesus well, and they have a very much a devotion to Jesus. If you're in a country like New Zealand, you're in a Protestant church, you're not there because you have to be. You're there because you choose to be. You're there because you take Jesus seriously. So there's a real devotion to Jesus there and a real desire to follow Jesus faithfully, to follow Jesus well. That's entirely linked to the scriptures and how we read the scriptures. So when a Protestant steps into a Catholic church, they're stepping in with it. They're stepping there because there's a real desire to follow Jesus, and they're exploring how that happens most faithfully.
Fantastic. I would add to that if I could. I'd say that some of the things that I think Catholics misconceive about Protestants, so if a Protestant was coming and asking me about joining the faith, I think that early on I thought exactly pretty much what you've just said, that all Protestants, because it is basically at that point we're clustering a whole lot of different denominations together and
Yes,
saying
you're
basically
from each
not
other.
Catholic. There's Catholic and not Catholic.
Yeah.
And so therefore you're almost anti-Catholic. Whereas the perception from every Protestant friend that I have and have had, it's not, they're not thinking about the Catholic Church in that way. Now maybe to your point, and maybe for a few hundred years after the Council of Trent, maybe that was the case, and in some parts of the world that might be the case. But in a New Zealand context, I haven't come across it in that way. So I would say that there is going to be a perception that if you are someone who's inquiring and you're coming from a different tradition and you come to meet a Catholic, they may be sitting there thinking, "Oh, I've got to get my defences up," because they're going to come at me and go, "Can you quote scripture? And can you can you get into this kind of detail?"
Yeah.
So I think being able to disarm that with, "Hey, I'm just here searching, same as you, about relationship with Christ, same as you, and just trying to find your expression of that. Can you talk to me about that?" Would be a really good way for the Catholic person that you're speaking to go, "Oh, okay, this isn't someone coming to attack me on the things that I don't know. They're asking what I do know."
Yeah. Your average Protestant, and again, there are some rabid anti-Catholics out there, just as there are rabid Catholic anti-Protestants. But your average Protestant, again, is not thinking about Catholicism that much. They view Catholicism as just another denomination. They don't see it as the trunk of the tree. They don't see it as the source. It's just another denomination. And for some of them, they don't even register Catholicism as Christian. It's seen as just another religion. So there'll be a lot of people who would say Christian and Catholic.
Yes.
My wife would own that she saw it like that, and only because she'd never encountered any Catholics growing up. No Catholics in her sphere, and there were never any catalyst to have to think about it, so it was just, there are Catholics.
And it's kind of like when people's formation is through media or through international representations, I think that can often be a stumbling block that needs to be unwound first.
Yeah. To come back to your point that you made earlier about not getting your defences up, this is a good encouragement, not just for Catholics, but for anybody sharing their faith. In our circles, the circles that I've grown up in, evangelism is a big thing. And there's a lot of pressure put on that. And there are often formulas and tools given so that you should feel confident doing it. Hardly anybody's confident doing it. Feel a lot of pressure. So I've always encouraged people to forget those and get more confident about just the fact that you're a Christian, Catholic. What I always loved from the outside, looking at Catholics, was it just felt like Catholics were comfortable in their skin. Now, it's been interesting coming over the fence and saying, "Oh, no, you guys are fairly insecure too." But it always felt like, we're Catholic. This is how it is. This is how the world is, and we'll just be Catholic. One of the things I like to tell people is your faith is a gift. God is the one who does the saving. God is the one who prompts other people's consciences. You don't have to convince them. Just offer them what you have. So, but that involves really listening and getting to know people. So then you can hear them and then just offer your faith into the mix. It might be that they're going through a struggle and you can offer to pray for them, take a meal round to them. But what part of you and what part of your faith is a gift into this person's life?
Yeah, beautiful.
Again, whether you're Protestant, Catholic, meeting a Protestant coming into the church, how is your faith not something that you have to defend? It's been around for 2,000 years through ups and downs, the best and the worst. God has defended his church. All you've got to do is offer the gift.
It was something you were saying that made me think about when you're asking questions of Catholics, and this is good for people who are searching and inquiring. If you think about in a situation where you've been asked a question and you don't know the answer to it, you don't want to necessarily admit that. We're sort of that's trained out of us in school. Yeah. So you mentioned Dan Story, who I know really well as well, and he's a fantastic guy, great guy. And if he's watching this, Dan, you're a great guy, but he doesn't know everything about the faith. And I don't know everything about the faith. I don't know if anyone knows everything about the faith.
Thomas Aquinas was pretty
okay.
good,
We're pretty close. Good point. Good point. I wonder what for you when you were asking some of these questions. Were there particular resources? Were there particular things that were able to equip the Catholics themselves to help answer that question, or where they could direct you to go? Yeah. I'm obviously conscious of the logo that's over my shoulder, but were there particular things from CEC or others that really resonated for you where you're like, this is the answer that I was looking for on that particular teaching?
Yeah. I mean, for me, there were massive books, and there was the Catechism and the documents of Vatican II, but I wanted to help, particularly my wife, understand some stuff as well, and she wasn't going to dive into all of that. So CEC has a resource called What Catholics Believe. It's a series of booklets.
Yeah.
So I asked Dan to bring that to me, and he did, because he works at the Auckland Diocese office, and he had a few copies. So he brought me a couple of sets. And those booklets are extremely good. They're a really, really good, solid introduction. So Catholic Inquiry Centre and its resources that are available. Then online there's a world of resources. Now, you've got to be careful online because there's a lot of conflict that happens online as well. But places like CatholicAnswers.com and their podcast, Father Mike Schmidt's Catechism in a Year podcast is really good for getting an understanding of Catholicism as well. So there are all of those resources, but I think a great first port of call is the Catholic Inquiry Centre.
Couldn't agree more. And the thing I guess I would say is to people who are searching is that sometimes if you are approaching a Catholic friend or someone who you meet if you visited a church, they may not know the answer, and therefore they may not know how to admit they don't know the answer either. So don't be disheartened if you ask someone a question about what is it about you and the saints or you and Mary, and they don't have the answer. It's funny. I apologetics, which is the term we use for sort of defense of the faith. I used to think it meant apologizing for the faith. Sorry, I don't know. I don't understand. And I do think that some of that is just a reality of taking for granted how things are. Yeah, but don't let it discourage you.
I think it's worth reflecting on if you're coming in and you have been Protestant, or you're new to the faith. You're probably going to be asking questions that the cradle Catholic hasn't necessarily had to ask, doesn't need to ask. This is just what faith looks like for them. They haven't asked nitty-gritty questions about the authority of the Bishop of Rome and apostolic succession or justification or what exactly is salvation or what do you mean by transubstantiation, because they've folded into that life, whereas the person coming in is going to have unique questions that they feel like they need to have answered. So then just being able to find the resources for those are really important.
And if I can encourage even further that the asking of the question, if I think about my own faith journey as a cradle Catholic, my own faith journey and my knowledge of my faith has grown because I've been asked questions. Yeah. And I've had to go, actually, why do we do that? Or why do we believe that? And it's a lot easier now to find those resources and to get those answers. But you may be doing your Catholic friend a favor. Yes. By asking them a question which they don't know the answer to, and they have to go search and find an answer that they agree with themselves. So let's take me to the Easter Vigil, the moment where, you've gone through this journey, you've been wrestling, you've been exploring, you've been struggling, and this is the moment. This is the moment when you come into full communion with the Church, the Catholic Church, and you get to receive Jesus in the Holy Eucharist. What was that like? What was it actually feel like to be there?
Yeah, that service is big. It is biggest service of the year. If your average mass is rock and roll, then that service is the metal. It is big, and it's you could say overwhelming. I'm looking forward to doing it next year because there are a bunch of moving parts in that service for me. I had Catholic friends there, so I'd had them around for a barbecue at our place beforehand because they'd all travelled in. So the hospitality side of that was really big for me. I had Protestant family and friends who were stepping into a Catholic church for the first time to be there with me as part of that. I had Protestant friends who I knew were watching online. And so I was thinking, I was most concerned about them having a positive experience and feeling like they were part of it. And all of them reflected that they did, which was extremely good. But right down to things like I felt the need to prep them for my confirmation name. So I had to prep them to say that in English-speaking countries, it is tradition that when the confirmation happens, that the confirmation saint's name is used rather than my name. So when the bishop uses that name, he's not getting
Getting
my
your name
name
wrong.
wrong. So is that. I was wearing a suit and I should have taken my jacket off because there were so many people in there. It was so hot, so I was very conscious that I was sweating, which meant that when we were all standing up there and the bishop was going along laying his hands, he could make the choice of either just holding his hands out to pray over everybody or to go along the row and put his hands on everybody's head. Now, I'm a bald guy, so when I start sweating, that sweat's got nowhere to go. So I saw him put his hands on the first person's head and I was like, oh, no. And then Father Darren was the next, and then Monsignor Trevor was next after that. And I saw him putting his hands on everybody's head properly. Like, oh. And he got to me and he just planted his hands on my sweaty head. So I was not focused on what he was praying at all. I was just worried about the sweat on my head. Father Darren comes along, who's now a friend, and he just puts his fingertips on my head. And then Monsignor Trevor comes up next. He just hovers his hands over my head.
There you go.
Yeah. They've just done the progression. So I was really conscious of all of that. I meant it when I said every word of the statement of belief in the Catholic Church and its teachings. Of course, we get to the Eucharist, and it is my first time taking it in the Cathedral. And my Catholic friends are all very excited afterwards. What was it like taking it for the first time? And I had to be honest and say it was decidedly ordinary. And that is a really good thing.
Okay.
I didn't need it to be overwhelming.
Yeah.
That Chrism service in Holy Week had been the big one for me.
Right.
That holy grief that played out. So I liked that it was ordinary. Whether it'll feel like that next Easter when I don't have all those moving parts in play might be different. But I fully believe that I consume the body and the blood of Jesus. That doesn't need to come with a feeling. I don't need to have some big transcendent experience. That is still real. That's what faith is. And then another very meaningful Mass happened on Tuesday, directly following Easter. I just thought, I'll go along to a midday Mass. Never been to a midweek Mass.
Right.
I turn up, and a lady gets up. I have a piece of paper with me. A lady gets up, and she just rattles through a whole bunch of lines, and everybody's responding really fast. Moves really quickly. And it's not until she's finished that I notice that that's at the end of the piece of paper. And I was lost by that point. And then the priest comes out and he leads the Mass. And I love this guy. And I've since found out that this isn't abnormal. And he isn't feeling like I was perceiving. I felt like he looked like he wanted to be somewhere else. Like he just rattled through it. It was monotone. And so it was just over and done really quickly. I took the Eucharist, but it was a relief that it was just so mundane. There were people sitting there who'd gone into confession beforehand, were clearly doing some stuff for themselves, quite devoted. But it was a relief. I'm like, okay, we can just settle into the very ordinary here. Jesus is still present. Doesn't have to be these big emotional feelings and this huge roller coaster all the time. We just fold into the ordinariness of faith. So that Tuesday Mass was just as significant as the Easter Vigil.
Wow. What were they rattling through? Was it the Angelus?
I don't know, no.
Okay.
I don't think so.
No.
I know the Angelus, so I would have got up with
some
that.
Sort of devotion.
I can't remember.
I'm intrigued now.
I'd have to grab the piece of paper because it went so fast.
It's interesting what you say there, and I would also say for those who are searching, if they've been with a friend and they've gone to Mass, the thing that's beautiful I find about the Mass is that obviously it is the same, although because of the Novus Ordo, it's in the language of the people. So when you go to Mass in Germany, it's in German, and go to Mass in France, it's in French. The thing that I find interesting about your experience of the ordinariness of the weekday Mass is if you've been along and it's not the smells and bells and the things going and the organ and the choir and everything going. And you're not getting that feeling. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't try again or go at a different time if that's what you're searching for. I think we have seasons inside the church, and in fact, what we call most of the year is ordinary time. And there's actually not a lot of ordinary about it, but it's the routine, the normal.
Yeah.
And I remember taking a friend of mine. We were traveling for work, and I was going to go to mass. And he said, "Oh, can I come along?" And I knew he was still a very good friend now. He's a Christian of a different denomination. And I said, "Yeah, sure, come along. This is great." And I thought to myself, "Oh, this is great. It would give a good opportunity for him to experience mass." And we were in New York, and we just went to a local parish church, and I couldn't understand what the priest was saying because it's a very thick accent, and like the music wasn't excellent, and like it was. And I'm thinking the whole way through the mass is this is his first, maybe only experience of the mass. And we've had these conversations over the years, and he's like going to be thinking, "What was James on? If this is what he's talking about." And I look back on that moment and go, "Oh, I wish I could have taken him to a cathedral and given him a big experience." But to have that appreciation of the ordinariness, to equate it to the grandeur and the majesty of the Easter Vigil Mass is very comforting for me to hear. And I would just encourage those who are searching to know that there is seasons, there is rhythm, they're not all the same.
Yeah. I had a conversation with Bishop Richard very recently, because the danger for me is it'd be very easy to head down the line of wanting all the incense, wanting the Gregorian chant, wanting the Mass in Latin. And I think those things are really beautiful. But what I would truly be chasing is a felt experience.
Right.
And reverence being given to me rather than me bringing reverence into the Mass. Reverence isn't determined by what's going on up the front. Sure, that has an effect. But because Jesus is being made present, doesn't matter the form around that. It matters, but there's a degree where it doesn't matter, because I come in and it's my choice to be reverent towards that. And the chasing of an experience, and this goes across Christendom, can turn into a fetish. And we can measure our faith based on the feeling that we're having rather than the choice we're making to stay faithful. I'm not called to have a feeling, I'm called to be faithful.
I think when you connect that to the sense of like bringing small children to church, and sometimes you feel, especially when the kids are little, and you're like, "Oh my gosh, why am I even here? I'm getting nothing from this." I'm saying the prayers, I'm kneeling at the right time and everything else, but there's no connection. And I remember talking to a spiritual director of mine who said that is prayer.
Yeah.
Being there is prayer. And it's not a matter of whether you feel the grace and whether you feel the connection to the divine. It's not that. It's you're there.
Yeah.
And because God never leaves us. It's not like he says, "I'm only there for the big moments. I'm only there on your wedding day, and I'm only there when you're all dressed up nice." No. I'm there in the ordinary. I'm there in the silence. I'm there in the mundane. I'm there the whole time.
Yeah.
So I think there's something beautiful about what you're saying there. And I think experiencing that is part of the experience of being Catholic as well.
It's Brother Lawrence's practice of the presence of God. God is there when you're doing the dishes.
Yeah.
And turning up to very ordinary masses helps to teach us that and shape us for what the rest of life looks like. And it's a reminder too that because of what we believe about what's happening at that table, when I walk in, whether I'm feeling it or not, and whether the kids are ready or not, if you've got really young kids, or whether you've hung over because you drunk a bit too much on Saturday night, or whatever you're bringing, you've chosen to walk in and you've chosen to connect yourself to that sacrifice that is being represented. You're there, you're part of it, whether you feel it or not.
So what has surprised you the most about becoming Catholic? What has, I guess, deepened or become richer? And what is still genuinely hard for you now you're a new Catholic?
Genuinely hard. I still have all the same inclinations that I did before becoming Catholic, but now I have a place to confess them. So the various struggles that I have are still there. I was hoping that those might miraculously disappear, but they haven't.
Let me know if that happens, and if so, what was the prayer?
But they haven't. Right. But actually, there was one thing that I took in, and I won't say what it was, but there was one thing I took into my first confession that I've struggled with for many, many, many years. But again, the integrated whole of having confession linked to the Eucharist, something happened where, again, there's no big miracle here, but that thing is not a problem now. because I heard someone say that I'm forgiven for it. I heard it verbalized. I've confessed it to Jesus many times. I've thought about it in general confessions in churches that do general confessions, but saying it out loud in a very vulnerable space and being very nervous when I did it, and hearing the priest tell me that I'm forgiven, and then knowing too that at the point of confession there, all I had to do was hold off doing that for a week, and then I'd be able to turn up at the Eucharist and take the Eucharist, and then I'd only have to hold off for another week, and then I could turn up at the Eucharist and take the Eucharist. Has dealt with it. So there's a beauty there again in the integrated wholeness of how those sacraments are working together and how the embodiment works. That embodiment, I think, is the most beautiful thing about Catholicism. When a priest is there in confession, he's not doing the forgiving, Jesus is, but he's doing it through someone who's physical. The Eucharist is physical. When I sit in front of a statue of Mary, I'm not honouring the statue, I'm honouring the one that the statue represents, but there's something physical there for me to be able to direct my attention towards. So probably the most beautiful thing is the physicality of the faith. It's beauty, it's buildings, it's people, it's sacraments. And the challenging thing is just those things that I still struggle with.
I think there's something very powerful about the fact, Christ was truly human and truly divine.
Yeah.
And if you think about it, we are very much physical creatures. We are material creatures. And so having those signs, those symbols, the smells and the bells, the physicality, the embodiment, as you say, I think is something very powerful. What, if anything, has changed in your relationship with Jesus through becoming Catholic?
I feel like I put, this might sound strange, I feel like I put less pressure on him to do stuff to me or for me. And again, I'll have Protestant friends who'll hear that and go, well, duh. But I just, again, feel less pressure. I turn up and he's there. I kneel down to pray and he's just there. And he doesn't have to do anything for me. And I've been on the radio. I remember getting a call from a young lady many, many years ago on my talkback show on Life FM. And she said to me she was walking away from the faith. And I asked her why. And she said, because God hasn't done anything for me. I'm like, well, he died on the cross. Like that's the whole point.
He's done everything.
Yeah, he's done everything. So I would have been able to intellectually say that, but I don't think it's until stepping into the bigness of the Catholic Church that I've really properly owned that I don't expect him to do anything for me. But there is so much gift that I get to step into and turn myself towards and receive.
So Frank, what do you wish someone had told you at the very beginning of your journey? Now, your journey is your journey. You've come through an incredible story, lots of different chapters to it as well, and the journey continues, the story continues. But what do you wish someone could have told you right at the beginning of your journey to becoming Catholic in particular?
Don't stress too much. The answers are there. Just take your time. Don't stress too much.
I love that. So if someone listening is, say, quietly asking questions about Catholicism, maybe they're a seeker, maybe they're someone who's searching in faith in general, maybe they're a Protestant or a Christian of a different denomination, maybe they're someone who once was Catholic and is maybe thinking about returning back to the church, what would you most want them to hear?
That is beautiful. And I choose that because I know I came in with my eyes wide open. Because I knew I was going to get questions about the abuses that have taken place in the Catholic Church. I knew I was going to have to wrangle with the history of despotic popes. The Renaissance, there are some great ones. I knew that I was going to have to deal with things like the Crusades and the Inquisitions, and sure, we can have a million and one arguments around those, but still plenty of people died. I knew I was going to have to deal with all of that. I knew that I was going to have to deal with people turning up at masses and it being decidedly ordinary. But it is beautiful, and it is true, and it is good. It is wounded, and it is stained by sin. The Catechism talks about how Jesus will right everything one day, and then the church will be presented to him without wound and without stain, but that means that it is wounded. But those wounds In some way, part of its beauty. I think about Jesus, the risen Jesus, showing his wounds to his disciples and to Thomas. He ascends with those wounds, so God in some way carries those wounds, these very human wounds. So if you have been Catholic in particular and you felt despondent about the church, I totally get it. But if we look at its 2,000-year history, it has been through stuff that is far more horrible than anything that's happening at the moment, and it still stands. Its heart, its core is true, beautiful, and good. And so if you're exploring, look for the truth, look for the beauty, and look for the goodness.
Frank, it's been a genuine pleasure spending time with you
Thank
just
you.
talking about your journey. I think it's something which I've had the opportunity to do a little bit more maybe than some have, and it's been a genuine pleasure. I just wanted to really thank you and affirm you for the fact that you are so open in sharing what your journey has been. And it's not like you have all the answers to all the questions. No, I don't think any of us do. But it's just been really, I just want to thank you very much for your openness and for your honesty and for your authenticity. And just, you're very welcome in the church.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I do feel welcome. And I do want to encourage people, just as we close this out, to check out the Catholic Inquiry Centre. I think if you're exploring for the first time, and if you don't have a friend who's guiding you through the Catholic faith, it is a great port of call to start to work things out.
Absolutely. And if there are particular questions that you can't find answers to, it's always good to reach out to the CEC and say, I haven't found an answer for this. Could you direct me to somewhere where I could? If there's something that is in the depths of your soul that you wish you could get an answer to, then this is a really great place to start. But we really thank you very much for spending time with us and wish you all the very best on whatever your journey and wherever it may take you.